So, welcome all of you, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to start this first series on India Opportunity Series. This COVID situation, COVID-19 had posed such a situation which has affected the economy worldwide and the health of the people. So now what is happening, a lot of industries, a lot of big companies are shifting their bases from different countries to other countries. And in this situation, India is getting benefited, may get benefit. In this, we have started a series called India Opportunity Series. The first in this series is based on aviation, and we have with us one of the eminent and esteemed speaker, Dr. Akhil Prasad, with us. Before I introduce him formally to the audience, I just give the background, why India. But before going to that, I will just give a brief, the profile of the audience who are there today in this meeting, so that we know what kind of audience are there and what kind of interesting discussion we are going to have. We have audience from large consulting companies globally. We have a lot of embassies who have registered with us, who are part of this particular session. We have people from the corporate councils of different large companies. We have lawyers, chartered accountants, and other people who are advising a lot of clients who are investing in India or large corporates. So this is we have certain international lawyer also who has registered here, who are participating in this seminar. So we have people from Europe joining this seminar and listening to Dr. Akhil. So now, why India? So I like to draw attention 1 or 2 minutes why India is better positioned or can be looked after by a lot of companies for investment or other opportunities. First of all, India is one of the largest democracy in the world, among one of the largest democracy. And India has a very strong political system where anyone cannot stop or depress a whistleblower. So it's a very working, very dynamic political situation, not like a communist country. India has never shown any ambitions of global conquest. We are a very friendly country, having very rich culture. So I think with those kind of things, India can be suited for many of the investors or the people who are looking to relocate their businesses globally. So with this, I would like to, before I formally invite Dr. Akhil Prasad, I would like to just give his introduction to the audience who are here, a formal introduction of Dr. Akhil Prasad. Though everybody knows you, but still I would like to do the honors and inform the audience about your background. Dr. Akhil Prasad is Director, Country Council India and Company Secretary with Boeing India. Dr. Akhil is currently member of Board of Directors of entities of Boeing Group. And in past, he has been on the Board of Directors of entities with Fidelity Group. In the past, he has worked with Fidelity International, Walt Disney, General Motors, Electrolux, and Xerox. Dr. Akhil has been nominated by various international journals and surveys. Dr. Akhil is Vice Chairman and an advisory board member to the Corporate Council Committee of International Bar Association. He is a speaker to IIM and IITs and is giving a lot of lectures around the globe. As far as his education, he is a very versatile professional. He has whatnot education to his credits. Dr. Akhil holds a doctorate, LLD, PhD in commerce, LLM. He is a company secretary. He is qualified from UK as well, not practicing. And most recently, he has completed Wharton Advanced Management Program. So with this, I would invite Dr. Akhil Prasad to give light on the topic of today's topic and enrich our audience, and so that we all are benefited with your experience. Over to Dr. Akhil.
Thank you, Samir. Thanks a lot for a very wonderful introduction. And I'm indeed, grateful for to India Juris and the organizations that you have tied up today for this very important subject. Because of COVID, we are having all of us are having doubts in terms of what do we think, how the economy will unfold, how the global economies will unfold. And this is, I would say, a very normal kind of a reaction. Because whenever we are in some kind of a crisis situation, people do have some kind of fear, because future is unknown, and when future is unknown, people get a little unruffled. And we have in our past seen some of the life changing situations, whether they are epidemics, whether there are financial meltdowns. And whenever we are witnessing those kind of things, the question always come in our mind, and these are all typical questions, is whether we are going to ever recover, how severe will this impact be, whether how many people are going to be impacted, those kind of situations. And the best thing is that in such a situation, everybody seems to be an expert. Everybody seems to be a predictor. But I always believe that whenever you are in such a situation, there has to be an optimist view, there has to be a pessimist view. A pessimist view will always perhaps tell us that this is something which is devastating, we will never recover. But history tells us that whenever we have had situations like these, there has been a recovery, and there has been a stronger recovery. So in a nutshell, I would think that this is also one situation which is quite deep, which is quite real. The problems will be quite a few. But on a long-term basis, if we see, definitely we are going to bounce back stronger and better. So, Samir, can you see my screen of my presentation?
Yes, we can see your screen. We can see your screen. Yes, please.
Okay. So, Samir, as per your email, I have very carefully tried to cover each and every topic. I will quickly run through the slides, whatever I have to discuss. And then, good part will be that if we can deliberate with people who are on this webinar as to
Yes.
what the questions are. So the first
Yes.
question, or the first topic that I would like to address today is, what is India's position in the worldwide aviation industry? And if we see on this chart, you know, this is a snapshot of how the world will look like in 2030, how the world will look like in next 10 years. And if we see on this chart, we will see a huge density of population and big cities which will develop in India. And just look at how many cities will develop in China, how many cities will develop in US. So you will see most of the red dots, which is city population of 10 million or more, those cities are going to be in 2030 be in India. And if the cities are going to grow by that number, it will grow by about 1.5 million people each week. It will occupy 1% of the land. So that is the density that we are talking about, and which will have 55% of the population. And you can also see that on this world map, such growth is also expected in terms of number of cities to grow, population to grow in other cities. And that is where, if cities are growing, population is growing, the mobility is definitely going to grow. So when we are talking about next 10 years, or the forecast for next 10 years in terms of population, COVID or no COVID, this is a reality. This is going to happen. So when this is going to happen, we are talking about the growth, the opportunities, which on a long-term basis would definitely be, which we will definitely see those opportunities. This slide, you will see, what are the transportation clusters, how the transportation clusters look like currently. So you see the transportation clusters today, and this is about aviation. So the aviation clusters we can see in US, we can see in Europe, highly dense, high density clusters. We also see, clusters emerging in Asia and also in India. And this is how, the clusters currently are interconnected in terms of air mobility. So these clusters, if we reflect back on the previous slide, if we see high density growth, city growth, population growth, we will see developed structures, developed clusters from India. Because the maximum number of cities, what we saw in 2030, the growth in population, the growth in middle class and higher earning class will definitely emerge from India. And since that will emerge from India, it is quite expected that the clusters from India will develop, and which will lead to the growth of the aviation sector on a long-term basis. This is also a snapshot of where we are today. So in 2017, when we were at seventh, location, or at the seventh position in terms of number of passengers to and from within a country. And by 2025, on a long-term basis, this situation will continue to favor India. This situation, because the population growth is from India, the number of cities growth is from India. That is the reason why the direction of this trajectory, in my view, should continue, despite whatever economic downturns, whatever COVID impacts we are talking about today. At least the direction that we are looking at from seventh position to number three position for India, in my view, should remain. This is an important slide, and we should see that what is our aviation landscape today. And if we see that today, perhaps the Indian aviation industry, which is divided into directly involved in aviation, for example, the airplane manufacturers. India, unfortunately, currently does not have an airplane manufacturing capability, but people who are directly involved in the aviation sector are today the airlines. So the airlines constitute about 400,000 jobs in an overall job market of 7.5 million jobs in India. The next is the supply chain. The supply chain contributes about 570,000 jobs. The employee spending, companies like, the tourism portals, Make My Trips and others, they constitute another 350,000 people. But the biggest chunk is actually from the tourism industry, which employs about 6.2 million people. So out of 7.5 million jobs, the biggest chunk comes from the tourism industry. And by tourism industry, it means everybody, whether it's hotels, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's taxi operators, tour operators. So the entire class of the bulk of 90%, about 80 to 90% people come from the tourism industry. And the gross value added to India's GDP is about 30 billion, and which contributes about 1% of the 1.5% of the GDP. So this is what we are today. Then we should also remember that India is on a huge expansion path in terms of connecting different parts of India through the regional connectivity aviation scheme, and where we are expected to add many airports. I don't know, I don't vouch for these numbers, because these numbers, they vary, but at least this is the kind of an indication that is in the pipeline for India. Because of the economic cycle, because of COVID, we may see a short-term dip in terms of the investments coming in terms of investments into FDI, into the brownfield or greenfield airports. But the fact that India needs to be connected to different parts, different districts need to be connected is something which will always remain to be a focus of the government. And since that is the focus and priority of the government, we will see that investment should keep on being targeted in terms of expansion of the regional connectivity and airports in India, which if we were to go to the first slide, the 2030 city landscape, and if we were to plot those cities on this map, it makes absolutely more sense that since by 2030 the population growth is going to grow, the number of cities are going to grow, the mobility requirements will also grow. So the domestic market, this is the domestic market on the regional connectivity. The
Yeah.
domestic market will require a lot of aviation, investment, where I do believe that on a long-term basis, we should definitely have these kind of investments coming in. One thing which I wanted to, since we are talking about COVID, one
Yeah.
thing I definitely wanted to applaud our own Air India um, and I'm very proud also because most of the planes that you see on this chart are Boeing.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
Air India has done a fantastic job in terms of reaching out to various people, whether in Japan, China, Italy, Israel, to do a rescue operations, in terms of getting people back, in terms of reaching out medicines to neighboring countries. That is the role which Air India has. We should applaud Air India for the wonderful work that they have done in terms of being a national carrier, in terms of doing the rescue services for the various people who were stuck due to COVID.
Dr. Akhil, for the audience benefit, before, I mean, I'll request you to just give a small brief of Boeing as well before we proceed with further with this slide. What Boeing is doing, how many countries it is operating, what kind of planes they are making at the moment. Little bit of Boeing before we, so that more people may join. At least we are all eager to know about Boeing also, what kind of planes, what kind of things they are coming up, or what is happening with Boeing. A little bit about Boeing, please, before we go with. That would make this whole presentation more interesting to us.
Thank you, Samir. So, Boeing, is a 100-year-old plus organization, and the journey has been quite remarkable. Boeing is known not only for civil aviation. Boeing is also known for defense, and 60% of Boeing's revenue comes from sale of commercial planes, and 40% revenue comes from sale of defense products, including India. So in India, whenever you see a plane, most likely when you see a single aisle plane, you should always remember for Boeing it is 737, and for Airbus it could be a series of A319, A320, and others. And apart from the 737 single aisle planes, we also, which is known as a narrow body plane, we also build broad body planes, which are typically 787s, 777s, and 747s. Also, Boeing has the business jets for the government of India, for our president and prime minister. That is also, I'm proud to say, it is also a Boeing plane. So internationally, we are known for, the brand that you see. Boeing is more relatable to the commercial plane side of it. But when you look at the defense side of it, also, we recently did a deal of about 37 fighter helicopters, which is Apache and Chinook. Those are from Boeing. And before that, we did two major platforms. One was on P-8I. So P-8I is a Poseidon plane, which is for Indian Navy, which is a derivative of a 737. And then when you see those, Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, there you see heavy lifters, those
Yes.
C-17s,
Yes.
or Top Gun. So Top Gun, the movie that you see in
Yeah.
Top Gun, the F-18s are from Boeing.
Okay.
So the heavy lifters and all those products are Boeing products. Okay, so moving to the next item, which was
So, Dr. Akhil, now I think we all know that it's Boeing is not only the plane which we fly. There is a lot more thing, lot of defense things are there. I think we would like to hear something on defense offset as well. There are a lot more opportunities in this sector. I think we are very enriched about hearing about Boeing. Yes, we can proceed with that.
okay. So
Yes.
defense offsets, as you said, Sabir, you're right. Offsets are, if we look at it from a very, very layman perspective. So whenever anybody sells products to and services to, largely products to the government of India,
Yeah.
whether it's Ministry of Defense or whether it's to Air India,
Yeah.
there is always an offset obligation.
Yes.
So, for example, if I sell $100 value of a plane
Yeah.
to Ministry of Defense,
Yeah.
so I have an offset obligation of 30%.
Yeah.
In the case of Rafale, it's 50%.
Yes.
So, which means essentially is under offsets, if Government of India buys from a foreign supplier, the foreign supplier should also do procurement of goods and services from India. So Boeing also has done, a very valuable participation in terms of offset requirements. And globally, we source about, in addition to about 1.5 billion worth of goods and services from India.
So I think there is a lot of huge opportunity for Indian companies, maybe Indian startups or Indian MSMEs or any kind of technical companies to come up so that Boeing may engage them in future if they are able to uh, at par with their quality.
Absolutely, Samir, because anybody who is doing some good work on the aerospace and defense side should be very, very optimistic. Not only because of Boeing, but there are other, OEMs in India,
Yes.
like Rafale. Rafale, Government of India purchased about 35 fighters,
Yeah.
and they will also will invest a lot on the offset requirements in India. So startups have a moment of cheer, that
Yeah.
startups should definitely continue to look at shaping their goods and services,
Yeah.
so that if they become suppliers to these defense companies,
Yeah.
the startups stand to gain, and also these companies stand to gain,
Yeah. Yes.
because companies like Boeing, like other OEMs like Airbus,
Yeah.
so these India has a great startup landscape,
Yeah.
and people are so motivated, they have brilliant ideas, and
Yes.
this is what most of these companies need in terms of the goods and services that are being manufactured or produced or developed by these startups in the aerospace and defense space.
Yes. So we can continue with our presentation. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So on the effects of COVID on aviation industry, as I said in my opening remark, was that the immediate reaction is a state of panic. And the state of panic is when we see that, so this is a slide which tells us from February 1 to March, end of March, and this has perhaps gone down, how the passenger traffic, air traffic has declined in past couple of months. So it's like, a landing of a plane, from 30,000 feet coming down to say 10,000 feet. Whether it's a crash landing, I don't think so. Whether the plane will go back again, a steep climb, I definitely think so. And, these are what I say, some people send me WhatsApp messages, and they tell us that, so many planes have been canceled by Boeing, by Airbus. Many airlines are letting go of people. So my immediate reaction is that this is not the first time this has happened. Is it permanent? The answer is no. Will it reverse? Of course it will. But when, the plane suddenly goes down, you
Yeah.
tend to get goosebumps. This is
Yeah.
perhaps what all of us are experiencing today.
Yes.
That we are thinking whether the industry has some problem. I don't think industry has any problem. But if you imagine, if every country in this world is
Yeah.
putting a clamp down on air travel
Yeah.
because of health and safety reasons, this is but expected. So as we saw last night, there was another order by the Ministry of Home
Yeah.
Affairs,
Yeah.
where the services are being now started slowly.
Yeah.
even in the red zone, in the orange zone, in the green zone.
Yeah.
So we will also see a reversal in the aviation industry. It may take longer, but will it not come back? I have no doubts.
Okay.
Likewise, on this slide, we see what is the impact on the share price. Obviously, if the passenger air traffic goes down, so will the share price, the stock price goes down. Um, and then, as I said, I don't believe in making any predictions or identifying numbers. I always look at those numbers with a kind of a suspicion, because nobody can predict how much loss or how much profit anybody would make. And when I see that the airlines will lose 113 billion, so the question is, why 113 billion? Why not 150 billion? And why not 80 billion? Who can predict this? It only depends upon how quickly we recover. And we have seen, Samir, when we had this 2008 financial meltdown,
Yeah.
and I was in Fidelity at that point of time. It was a mutual fund and an investment company.
Yes.
So it was being predicted that Indian banks will fail, like what happened in the US. This will also
Yes.
happen in India. Nothing of that sort happened, fortunately. And I am keeping my fingers crossed that even in India, in the aviation sector, it doesn't happen. And whatever recovery, thanks to our strong domestic market consumption requirement for aviation and aviation services, I think it should come back very, very strongly. So this chart tells us. So we should also look at, have a snapshot of when people say that aviation and tourism is going to take a strong beating. We should also look at how the other businesses will have an impact on COVID. So, do we see the aviation services or the aerospace industry on the top of the chart? We don't. What we
No.
see on the top is perhaps full service restaurants, temporary health services, accommodation, entertainment, personal healthcare services. Then we see air transportation.
Yes.
So it is not like that the worst impacted is the aviation industry. There are other industries also which may perhaps do worse than this aviation industry. It does not give me comfort while I look at this slide, because the people employed, when we look at the migrant labor issue, that is the migrant labor issue we see on the full service restaurant and temporary health services. Those kind of sectors are the most impacted sectors. That is where the worry is, where we have unskilled people or we have a semi-skilled people, where the recovery may be, much longer than an aviation industry. That is why I say so, that perhaps aviation industry may come back sooner
Yeah.
compared to other industries where the opportunities are limited.
Do you think that this work from home culture, which is coming, a lot of video conferencing is coming, would it affect the air traffic or something like that? Would there be any such kind of impact on with this kind of culture coming in? What we have learned after COVID?
I would say, Samir, everything will be a short-term reaction.
Yeah.
In a short term, if you say, assuming today is day zero,
Yeah.
day zero, that government of India announces that no district in this country has seen any COVID case in past 1 week. There are no containment zones, all the
Yes.
containment zones. So assumingly that is day zero, I would say people will still not travel for next a couple of months. But what will, so assumingly today is day zero, we are 2nd of May.
Yeah.
So May, June, July, August, when there will be university admissions internationally, when there will be intake of students, in India, students will have to travel.
Yes.
Colleges will have to open. So those kind of things will happen. And if those kind of things will happen on a selective basis, airlines will also be allowed to operate.
Yes.
Ultimately, airline is one of the safest form of medium of transportation. Airports are one of the cleanest places you can see or where you
Yes.
can go to. So those kind of things will definitely see a push by the government that they will allow those kind of sectors. And that's what I think. I can't predict, but that is what I can logically think. So this chart also tells us that aviation, chart tells us which kind of industries in
Yeah.
COVID are in a high exposure zone, moderate exposure zone, or a low exposure zone. And see, in the center, some of the industries are also, reaping the benefit of COVID. For example, internet services, online retail. This will see that these industries will do well. But if you see on the top, the circumference, high exposure, that is where the automobile manufacturers, the aviation industry, passenger airlines are definitely there. So we will have definitely a high exposure, a exposure for us, small to a medium term, but on a long term, you know, definitely the outlook should be very, very positive. Um, this is what typically what we see, whenever we need read newspaper, whenever we read or we go to see the news channels. Tough times are ahead, which is absolutely true, because international travel and domestic travel is banned. And even in the order of MHA yesterday, the travel, the air travel is banned, at least for next 2 weeks, till the orders are in force. Tour operators, hotels will lose, tour operators will lose for a short term. That's what I think. Then, industries also asking for some kind of a support, that we should have GST waivers. Situation should be reviewed every 10 days. um, GDP will be impacted. um, but I think, as I said, whenever there is a there is a pandemic like this, there has to be a panic. And when there is a panic, this is what we normally read in press. How much these predictions are true, nobody can say. But there will be a short term impact. So quickly coming to Samir, some of the
Yeah.
legal challenges that we see. um, and I see the legal challenges, related to, first is on the Epidemic Disease Act. It is so surprising that a disease which is of 21st century, we are dealing it with the law which is 1897. So the
Yes.
Epidemic Act of 1897 is what we are using to, and Disaster Management Act is what we are using to deal with the COVID situation.
In fact,
But
this epidemic act disease, this act was made when there was a when the plague broke in British times. So it is, the act was made at that point of time when it was the plague was there, but it
yes,
is continuing that way. Yes.
yes. And then, the impact on employees, impact on supply chain, the customer contracts, force majeure, and government orders. So these are, some broad areas I wanted to touch. So if you look at the Epidemic Disease Act, this is where, in 1897 also, quarantine processes were thought about. Late working of women was thought about. It was also thought about after 1897 that the government could clamp down on the electronic media. Um, there could be, directions to close schools, colleges, gyms, cinema halls, etc., etc., where the mass population could be there. So those kind of provisions were made under this particular act, and that is why some people ask us whether, what if we violate? If you violate, then it's a last bullet. Violation of the provision of COVID regulation will be an offense under the Indian Penal Code, where you can be imprisoned, you can be fined. And that is why, as legal professionals, we are extremely careful of giving any advice which could violate the directions issued under the Epidemic Disease Act. So the government orders which are issued under the Disaster Management Act and the Epidemic Disease Act have a legal provision, have a penal prosecutions if these laws are violated. In terms of impact to people, there have been a lot of debate currently, Samir, and
Yeah.
which is largely on the fact that when we are employing people, and some people are saying that we are going to cut our manpower by say 25% or 30%, 35%. Under the March 29 order of the issued by the government of India, it is said that, or recommended, it's a question mark, that people should not be terminated, the wages should not be reduced. So the question that comes to us as the legal counsels of the company is, what about the contract manpower. What about subcontracting of manpower? And subcontracting of manpower can also be for highly skilled engineers. For example, Boeing has a contract, say, with Wipro or with Infosys or a TCS, wherein we hire people on a secondment basis, they're engineers. That is one category. The second category is when you hire semi-skilled or unskilled people, whether it's a security guard, whether it's an office staff, whether they are drivers. So that is another category of contractors. The third category of contractors is when you are doing some construction. And on construction activity, you are deploying manpower. And the fourth category, which should be the first category, is your own people. So how do you look at these government orders when you take a decision of reducing wages or terminating people or reducing contractual staff?
So how Boeing is dealing with this situation? Because Boeing is such big, you have huge manufacturing, you have large, highly skilled engineers, and you have a huge number of contracts. So how Boeing is tackling this situation?
So, we have to be very, very objective, Samir, in terms of we should definitely realize the problem that if somebody is to be asked to go or terminated, the person is going to definitely be put into a very, very adverse financial situation or may undergo a adverse financial situation. So the first thing is whether these people are productive, whether these people who are also contractors can work from home. And then we have to make a very qualified assessment. And the third thing that we have to understand is, for example, somebody which is unskilled or a semi-skilled. So you don't need, say, 100 security guard, you need only 50 security guards. And you let go those 50 security guards. Usually the contractors or the suppliers work on a that you pay me and I pay them model. It's a pass-through.
Yes.
So if we let go, say, 50 security guards, we should be careful about the fact that these people will be out of job the very next day. So to the maximum extent possible, we have definitely ensured that whatever people we have been employed since March 25th, when the lockdown orders were enforced, and March 29, when the MHA order came on retaining people, we have not let go any person.
Okay. That's great. Good.
Yeah, and whether it's in any category, the various categories that I described to you, and it's not about somebody having a deep pocket or somebody having a not a deep pocket. It's about how concerned are we in terms of tackling a disaster, and whether are we investing in our people in the time of a crisis. So how are we dealing with the crisis is something which is very, very important. Then there are other categories like social distancing measures. In last night's order, which came from the MHA, they have also allowed people to start working from offices with a 33% occupancy, even in a red zone. But if it is not in a containment zone, so those kind of social distancing measures have to be implemented. One thing which is also very critical is that the Arogya Setu app is something which have been identified under yesterday's orders, that from the workplace, it is important that all employees need to have Arogya Setu app, which has been done by the government, I think, mainly so that the tracking of these COVID cases becomes easier. But now, it was not there earlier, but it is the first time it has been introduced in the MHA. So that is also for social distancing measures for containment of the epidemic.
Yes.
So, so this is a kind of what we try to do when we are dealing with the employee issues, the legal issues related to the employees. Then there are certain relief measures, Samir, on the by the government of India, which is regarding payment of provident fund, both contributions, 24% for employees having up to 100 people and 90% of them earning 15,000 per month. Then people can also withdraw PF from their balances. And I was quite, there was a huge number. I don't recall how many thousand crores, but people did reach out to their provident fund accounts to withdraw money because they are in dire state of funds. And then even on the Bakwa, the construction workers is where the government of India has pledged to transfer funds for the benefit of the construction workers. So these are the kind of snapshot in terms of employee and these are the guidelines which I try to, and our HR, working with our HR, we try to tell our organization that we should keep a calming effect, rather than people know that this is something which is quite serious, but we have to make their lives better. We should have a calming effect. We should put people first, that your priority. So as I said, when you ask that question, what did we do? So we did
Yeah.
support
Yeah.
our contracted staff.
Oh.
And that is people first, because we do know that it's a brand, it's an international brand, it's a brand people associate with. So that is what was very, very important for us. This is mostly on the supply chain. So Samir, very briefly on the supply chain, it is very essential that when we are now looking at coming out of COVID, it is very important for all companies to ensure that the supply chains are restored. So by supply chain, for example, a manufacturing company, a supplier to a manufacturing company will say that they will issue you a force majeure notice that due to COVID, I can't perform. They will give you a mitigation plan. That mitigation plan, sometimes people say with a fear that I will not be able to recover, say, till December 2020. But then the job of the legal counsel should be to work with these suppliers along with your procurement teams to make them understand, to give them that confidence that I am standing up, I'm going to help you, and you please don't invoke a force majeure. And if there is a force majeure, it should only be from 25th March till when now the government has started May 1 to start production, at least in the SEZs, in the EOUs and all those industrial sectors. So till the time government has allowed you, that should be the period of force majeure. And anything beyond that, we should work with the supplier to mitigate any loss to the supplier, to yourself, so that we are trying to achieve the best we can do to achieve a win-win situation. So dealing with those force majeure notices, force majeure instances on sustaining the supply chain should be the very important consideration. And the same will apply for our customers. So when we are selling goods and services, the customers will have a tendency to say, I can't pay you because I have a severe cash issue. I could not achieve sales. So that those kind of issues, force majeure and other things are also which will come in this regard. So what I would like to emphasize here is that Ministry of Finance also came up with a guideline that talks about that has included pandemic as a part of a force majeure.
Yes.
So most of us on this call would have received these circulars from Ministry of Finance,
Yes.
wherein they have said that whosoever is a supplier to the Ministry of Finance will get a benefit of force majeure during an epidemic. But we should be very, very objective. As I said, it should not be an excuse for a supplier not to perform. We should analyze the problem, not litigate, but mediate. We should mediate with the supplier. We should mediate with our partners to find out a solution so that we come out of this problem as quickly as possible, rather than starting a litigation and stopping things. So mediation is something which we should initiate rather than litigate and stop things. A little snapshot on how the litigation management has been, and you know it very well, Samir, that Supreme Court and other courts have started giving these benefits and tribunals that the period of COVID would be an excusable delay, would be a limit, will extend the limitation period also, which is a step in the right direction. And courts are entertaining litigation over video conferences, over phones, over video, other things are technology is being used so that there is no disruption on the delivery of justice. And these are some of the great initiatives by the government on the litigation management side. This is something which I will like to encourage all of us, as at least as the legal counsels, that we should keep a complete control of all the government orders, that are coming our way. And we have to guide our organizations as to what it means. For example, some time ago, some suppliers would say, although I am producing something, but I can't send it to you by truck, because the highways are closed. But in the previous 14th April order, the interstate movement of goods were allowed, which has been also been strengthened in the May 1 MHA order. So we have to really interpret, analyze these orders, and we have to ensure that we are on top of these government orders, and that we help our business in terms of implementing these government orders and also working with the government. So very quickly, Samir, coming to another question that that you put up on the opportunities in aviation.
Yes.
So this is what this is a very interesting slide. So if you see, out of these 5 airlines, 2 are no longer there.
Yes.
So Jet Airways and Kingfisher are no longer there, and it was not due to COVID.
Oh, yes. So Jet Airways and Kingfisher were using Boeing, or what kind of planes they were using?
Jet Airways was Boeing, Kingfisher was also Boeing.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was Jet Airways was a big setback, because it did reduce the market share. But then you have now Vistara.
Yeah.
And I have deliberately used an old picture to emphasize the fact that industry is evolving. Industry will continue to evolve. So although the Kingfisher and Jet Airways are no longer there, but now you have AirAsia and Vistara. So the number has grown, it has not reduced. And this will continue to grow in future also, because these 2 airlines went down not because of COVID, but because of other problems. So India's aviation sector, I removed a word. I wrote it earlier, India's booming aviation sector, which perhaps was a situation till about 2 years ago. But India's aviation sector is still very robust. So it is poised to be the 3rd largest domestic civil aviation market in the world. It will replace UK to become the 3rd market by 2025.
So when you say largest market, in terms of traffic traveling, or in terms of manufacturing, other businesses as well?
Air traffic, mostly air traffic. And then the Civil Aviation Authority, aviation industry will see a lot of focus on low-cost carriers. Remember my earlier slide on the regional connectivity, modernization of airports, foreign direct investment will come in greenfield and brownfield airports. The 4th bullet is something why I removed the word booming. I wanted to write booming, which is booming, but because of the economic slowdown in last couple of years, remember the aviation growth in 2017 was about 18% on a year-to-year basis. But last year we saw a growth of only 3.7%, and which was 18% in 2018, but last year it slowed down to 4%. So that impact was not due to COVID. That was perhaps an impact on a global slowdown, economy slowdown. Various countries suffered a slowdown, and India was not immune to such slowdown. As a result of which, in 2019 we saw a dip of it came down to just increased about 3.74%. The next few couple of years, I would say, may perhaps see a similar small number in terms of growth. There may be a free fall for 2020 in terms of degrowth, but on a long-term basis, I am quite sure, if you look at an outlook of 2 to 3 years time frame, we will again see a double-digit growth in terms of growth of this aviation sector in India. Last year, the bigger impact was because of Jet Airways that the industry suffered, but I'm sure. But look at Indigo. Look at Indigo. Indigo strengthened its leadership, its market share went up to 47%. And the airline carried about 67 million passengers in 2019. So it is, they have done very, very well. And then this is what I mean by an outlook. If you see that the current the current fleet in India is about about anywhere between 550 to 600 planes, the current capacity, which will increase to 920 aircrafts by 2025. So there may be a degrowth. The number may come down from 920 to say about 850, but still there's going to be growth. It may not be a 18 to 20% growth that we saw in the previous years till 2017, but in next 2 to 3 years, we'll continue to see a double-digit growth, say in about 2022 or 2023. Is that what I feel? Then as per DPP, we did attract foreign direct investment in civil aviation. In last 20 years, we have seen about 100 billion FDI in civil aviation sector. And then there's going to be a 25 billion investment in the airport sector in the next few years. And then, you know, all these numbers that you see are just projected numbers. But the point here is that airports, brownfield expansion in Delhi, Bombay, Hyderabad, and Bangalore will grow. We are already looking at the growth of Bangalore airport. We already know that Xavier airport is going to come near Noida. So all those investments are already planned investments. And we will continue to see investments in those kind of categories. Then regional connectivity, I already spoke about. Then also to enhance the international aviation, Samir, what is important is that previously you needed to have a 5-year, 5-year operational requirement to fly international, which has now been done away by the government. So instead of a 520 rule, it is now a 020 rule. So even a new airline can start international operation, which is a good step. And then, of course, Air India, Government of India, there were restrictions up to 49% FDI, but now government has allowed 100% investment by NRIs, because government still want that it should be controlled and owned by Indians.
Yeah, here I would like to interrupt. Dr. Akhil, there is an airline which is Indore-based airline, which is Fly Big. Are you aware about that? That is going to start their operations. They have newly acquired ATR aircraft. So could you know in this, could you throw some light how in this environment they would be able to do it? Is conducive for a new airline to start operations?
It's going to be tough for sure, but it
is
depends.
Flybig also using Boeing?
No. So for regional connectivity, I'm sure they may be using either Embraer or Bombardier, because I have not heard about that airline, but what I do believe is that they may be doing it for regional connectivity. And when you do a regional connectivity, you perhaps need a plane which has about up to 100 seats. So if you go to Airbus or to Boeing, you will only have planes which have a minimum 150 seats. So up to 100 is where you go to Bombardier or a Embraer. Perhaps they may.
I think they have acquired ATR aircraft. I'm not aware what is ATR aircraft, but they have. To me, it is informed they have acquired ATR aircraft.
Could be, could be from either Bombardier or Embraer.
Okay. So how conducive it would be for such a new airline to begin this kind of situation?
See, it purely depends, Samir, on it. We can't generalize that, because it purely depends how deep are pockets of the promoters who have started it, whether they are on a long haul, whether they can capitalize initial losses, and then they can really pull it out. There seems to be a lot of potential in regional connectivity. So it purely depends. It will be unfair for me to analyze without facts.
Yeah.
But what I definitely believe that any business, if you are doing it efficiently, if you are mixing your opportunities on the passenger side and the cargo side, perhaps you may have a positive cash flow. So that is something which purely depends on what plan the promoters are adopting for that airline. Opportunities for FDI lies in airports, air transport services, and ground handling and MRO services. So this is going to be one of the future remain, and it is a focus of the government of India, that this is where they want to attract FDI. And what we have seen in the previous slides, I have no doubt that on a long-term basis, these sectors will not attract investment. They are going to definitely attract investment in the long run. So we will only see a matter of time. Had it been a normal situation, had we not seen an economic slump in last 2 years, had we not seen COVID, perhaps these investment would have started coming in. They may get a little delayed, but they are inevitable. They will definitely come. As I was browsing through the website of the FTI on civil aviation side, I did come across that Safran is trying to invest 150 million for MRO operations for their products. Then there are a few more investments which are in the pipeline. This is a little old information, which I could not find some new information, but this is what was on the ministry side. I thought I should put up on the slides.
But this is indicating that investments are going to come to in India in these sectors.
Absolutely, because this is something which, if you can find on the Government of India's website, that is where. And I was also reading in the news, on the web today, that PM held a meeting yesterday. PM did, so his focus is still maintained. He's still very, very focused on defense. He's very, very focused, and he wants to make in India in a very big way. The new DPP 2020, which has come in, puts a lot of focus on manufacturing or defense in India. They have come up with a new category in the DPP, Defense Procurement Procedure, which is about buying global dash manufacturing, which means an OEM, which is a foreign supplier, technically Boeing, being a foreign company, can use its Indian subsidiary to manufacture in India with a 50% localization. So that's a great scheme. That's a great thought by the government, because they are now thinking in terms of making India self-sufficient defense, building more capabilities in India. Likewise, yesterday, PM also put up a lot of focus on these categories in his ministerial meetings, that we should not lose focus on how we have to develop aviation in India. So that process is already on. So it was a PIB release on that. He held a meeting yesterday on aviation sector. So this is a snapshot. The legal colleagues on this webinar will know that these are the various regulations which apply to the aviation industry. My only point of focus is this has to be rationalized.
Yes.
There are still too many windows that a aviation industry or a aviation operator has to go to. So this has to come down. There needs to be a single window clearance system, so that there are not many doors where you have to go. So this is something which is a forward-looking thing, which I think we should highlight to the government, that please rationalize the regulators and the regulations. And then you asked me a question, what are the expectations, Samir, of aviation companies during COVID? I think primarily there are two. One thing which caught my attention yesterday was when we Google and then we see that out of a 7.5 million job market, 2.9 million jobs in India are at risk. That's a huge number. And when we saw on our previous slide, the major impact was on the tourism sector.
Yes.
So which had the maximum number of people. We had 90% population in the tourism sector. Yes. So that is where we see the maximum impact in the tourism sector will be. On the civil aviation, there might be impact, but biggest on the tourism sector. That is where what we need to tackle. The most important thing what airlines are now asking the government is that please give us a benefit of force majeure.
Yes.
Whatever commitments we had made to you, to the airports authorities, to the DGCA, please give us a benefit of a force majeure.
I think government in many of the departments, they have already issued notifications that the supply chain companies can claim force majeure during these situations.
Correct.
Yes.
The second thing which they are asking for is a bailout.
Yes.
So just look at US government, what they have done. They have a fund of 50 billion, which they will bail out their airlines. But should or can we have a fund like this in India? Is a question mark. So that's why I put a question mark, because funds in our country are quite limited. We have to first look at farmers. We
Yes.
have to first look at the social sector, which is in a grave need of desperate need of funds. And I only wish that the government also looks at bailing out the aviation industry in some way or the other. So that to me seems to be the primary asks by the aviation companies. So there may be others like waiver of GST, oil. I think nobody's talking about oil anymore because of
Yeah.
the oil, of the crash, of the price crash that helped. So that is why it's not on this list, because it was negative 40 cents, till some time ago, the price of $1 per barrel. So in fact, companies were paying to retain the oil barrel. So
So one of the audiences, one question is popping up in front of me on my screen, that when fuel, the airport, the jets, everything is same, then how one airline is better than other? When everything, when the airport they are using the fuel, the planes all are having Boeing, then how one airline is better or inferior to other? Can you just throw some light how it
see,
works?
it depends. So if you look at most of these airlines, you will also analyze. For example, if you see Kingfisher Airlines,
Yeah,
now everybody knows why did that fail.
yeah,
When we look at Jet Airways, perhaps the equity injection should have been brought in from the partners much earlier. Um, and that's a great question, because if the entire all constants remain the same, it
yeah,
remains as to how efficiently you navigate your airline. For example, Indigo has been a role model, the way they have been able to keep their profit and loss account positive despite oil shocks, despite the cost of operation. So it really depends on how you run your business, how you can minimize cost. For example, Indigo, Indigo, you will not see them operating from the premier airports. For example, T3, they will not operate from T3. They will keep their cost down. They will operate from 1A, 1D, or 1B. So things like those do add up in terms of how you reduce cost, how you maintain profitability. Oil price is the same, but there are several factors how you run an airline. So yeah. So this is one of my favorite slides. During COVID, all I can say is that we have to keep our thoughts positive, because if we keep our thoughts positive, we will have positive actions. And if we have positive actions, we will be able to deal with the crisis in a much better way than keeping negative thoughts and negative actions in our mind. And because of those positive thoughts, I definitely believe that we will definitely survive this COVID downturn. There may be a little pain for some industries. There may be some job losses, but I'm sure with the huge Indian market that we have, we will definitely see a reversal very quickly. It happened in 2008 during the financial meltdown. I am quite sure with the huge Indian market that we have, uh, recovery should be quicker in India compared to what we have seen in the other countries. So thank you very much. We can take questions, Samir.
yes. So I think a lot of questions are popping up. The audience is quite interactive. So many people have already sent their questions to me. We don't have that much time, but I would take up questions which have already come to me. So one question which one of the audience have asked the question, any comments on revisibility of lifting of global grounding order, Remax aircraft?
Sorry, which order is that, Samir?
So it says any comments regarding visibility of lifting of global grounding order. I mean, global grounding order means the whole world, wherever the flights are grounded. Remax aircraft. I'm not sure what is exactly Remax aircraft is.
Oh, I think they must be asking about our 77 Max
Yeah.
issue. So I think, it is actively being pursued, and because it requires a lot of focus in terms of how uh, the software MCAS, the other wiring harnesses have to be set up. So at least from our perspective, we are doing everything that needs to be done to already. It's a very safe aircraft, by the way. It's one of the latest engineering product that you will see. But since the regulators require more safety features to be put and demonstrated, that is exactly what we are doing. And in terms of working with regulators, we are very, very hopeful that we should be able to get the permission to fly again by end of summer. Is that we are looking at?
Yeah. So one of the audience is asking why most of every airline in India is not able to survive in the end.
See,
but I don't think this question is completely correct. But but you can give more light on this.
See, so if you look at history, yes, there have been, for example, when we started to open up, we had East and West Airline, we had Damani Airways, but Jet Airways did survive quite long.
Yes.
And at the end of it, the reasons for Jet Airways coming down was not because of the industry overall, but I think it was more about what I believe is the management, how they dealt with that particular situation. Same I would apply for Kingfisher, but we have seen Indigo Airlines, who have been in a very short span of time, they have acquired a market share of 47%. And I definitely think that they are in for a very, very long term. And aviation industry is not a very easy industry. It requires tremendous, amount of infusion of funds, and to be able to sustain and rotate those funds is not very easy. Somebody who can do it very, very efficient, and that has been also been a case internationally. So if you see the US aviation market, if you see the European aviation market, there has been a lot of churn in terms of how many people wanted to set up airlines and how many have gone down or disappeared. So this will continue to evolve. But one thing is for sure, that whosoever is able to manage the cash flows, keep the cost down, is something who will be very, very successful in this business.
So we'll take one more question. One is where the audience, he is from a luxury automobile sector. He says where the luxury car companies, Mercedes, Audi, BMW, Jaguar, all production is not happening and the things are coming from China. So whether that kind of thing exists in with Boeing also, or in aviation industry, and what is the impact of that if you don't have certain parts or something which is not coming from China, or you have to, or Boeing is also required to ship something from somewhere, or just throw light on that aspect.
Yeah, so automobile manufacturing, I was also I used to work for General Motors almost 15 years ago, and during those times the situation was what we are in the aviation industry today. So not a great deal of manufacturing used to happen in India. Either cars were completely built units, or they were only assemblies. Also, localization was very restricted. The engines used to come from outside, the body used to come from outside. It was more of a assembly. So over these 15-20 years, we have seen most of the important well-known luxury car makers have started to manufacture in India, except for their very, very high-end models, which are now imported. But other than that, most of these companies are manufacturing in India. Aviation industry has also seen a lot of traction in terms of suppliers. As I said, when we have to do this offsets,
Yes.
for these offsets, we have companies like Mahindra, Tata's, L&T and others who are building great capabilities for defense manufacturing of parts and components currently. But I do believe that, it is still a little not mature landscape that an Indian company manufactures a commercial plane. We may see that happening in future, but till that time, I do believe that manufacturing for aviation and aircrafts for at least next 10 years or so would continue to be outside India. However, we have seen a lot of progress in terms of um, the aviation aircraft manufacturers to set up finishing centers outside of US. For example, Boeing set up its finishing center in Zhoushan in China. So when we are selling planes to, say, Air China, so that finishing center is now based in Zhoushan, where we are finishing our planes. So I do believe that similar things may happen in India in a very near future.
So this is the last one. The last before I close. Thank you. This is the last one, I think. Suppose there is a startup in India or a small company or any Indian company who is a related company or maybe doing something related to what Boeing does, or it may be useful for an offset. So how does they approach Boeing? I mean, suppose if I am a startup or I'm a MSME or I am a small company and I am doing something related to civil aviation or defense, then and I want to contact Boeing, then what is the process? Where should I go? What should I do?
See, usually, what we do is we associate with IITs and technology institutions in India, and we also work with a lot of T hubs. Like we have a Telangana hub, so we work with them, and that is where these startups should start showcasing their capabilities. Coming up in so we do also have these aero competitions. These IITs and other institutions, they conduct these kind of competitions, and they encourage participation of startups. That is where the startup should focus. And if there's a great idea, definitely not why Boeing, there are so many others, aviation manufacturers who participate, and that is where the startups should definitely try and focus and make themselves visible on these kind of platforms, where most of the defense companies and aviation companies participate to look at ideas, to invest in those ideas.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Akhil. I think this was an excellent session, and all of us got a tremendous and very insight in the civil aviation sector, and everybody is now enriched further with the knowledge on aviation sector and how India stands, how the aviation sector is fighting with COVID, what are the impacts on it, what is the job segregation, how the jobs are created in the civil aviation section. Thank you for highlighting all those things. And I would like to mention that this session is live on YouTube. It is watched heavily by a lot of people on YouTube as well, and the recordings would be available at YouTube as well. Before closing, I would like to thank Chamber of Startups and Industries and Startup Chamber, which has helped us in conducting this webinar. We are equally helpful to co-working place, which is My Place Co-working, who has been one of the partner in this webinar. And I think with this, we again thank Dr. Akhil Prasad for giving his time from his busy schedule. Thank you, Dr. Akhil, for being with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Samir. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.